Hello, and thank you for joining us today for another good table talk. I am Tracy with Made Possible By, and I am so excited today to introduce to you a friend of mine that I've known for several years. Isak Pretorius is coming to us today from all the way from the other side of the world. Isak is in South Africa, or as I wish that I could sound like I talk South Africa, because I wish I could talk that. I can't. I had the privilege of meeting Isak years ago. My husband met him through a business associate, and they got to talking about what Isak does. And Isak was talking to my husband about possibly being involved. And Mike said, "You have the wrong Zerden. You want to talk to my wife." And from there, and my son and I were able to go to South Africa and join them for a week, traveling to a couple different countries and seeing the really exciting things that they are doing, making such a huge impact on that entire continent. So Isak, give us a little 90-second about you, and then I want to jump in and talk about the impact that you're having.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, an African at heart. South Africa is the country in Africa that I'm from, but definitely an African at heart, and just love our continent, and have spent most of all of my working life really serving our continent. And in various different forms, some in the business side of things, in the philanthropy side of things, and as well as in some church work, etc. And so I'm 43 years old and have an amazing wife that keeps me honest and on the straight and narrow, and two awesome kids. My daughter Kira is 14 and my son Peter is 10. My son was named after my dad, who is not just my dad, but my hero, my mentor, somebody who had an incredible influence on my life, but also was the founder of JAM as an organization. And him and my mom were co-founders together and really built the organization that is what it is today. So.
I love that. And your dad recently, it's been 2 years, passed away, but what a legacy that he left. I mean, I ordered that book, by the way. They just wrote a book. I'm excited to get that. I did have the honor of getting to him when I was there. So that was there's very few people that you meet that have that kind of an impact. I mean, on millions of people. And he was definitely one of those people. So that's so exciting. So I just want to jump right in. JAM does so much. Tell us what JAM stands for. And it's hard to give a synopsis of what you do, because
it is what, but so JAM stands for Joint Aid Management, but it's really just known as JAM everywhere where we operate. And we're really a multifaceted relief and development organization, focused solely on Africa. So all of our operational programs are really in Africa. And we focus on a couple of core sort of pillars, as we would call them, of intervention. So the one is food security and livelihoods. People say, what does food security and livelihoods mean? And well, everything that we do that is about helping communities to provide for themselves, okay, and to create a sustainable future for themselves, it falls into our food security and livelihoods programming. So it's empowering people to be able to improve their own lives, a hand up, so to say, rather than a handout. Okay, and so we have a core philosophy in some ways that kind of says, well, we believe that people that can and should be working are provided with an opportunity to work, even if that's to work for themselves in order to improve their lives. But on the other side, we also believe that those that can't or shouldn't be working, for instance, children that are school-going age, that they should not be working. In the developed world, we call that child labor. And so we believe that those beneficiaries should receive a direct assistance. And so I always say to people, people say, well, if you give a fish, you feed for a day, but if you teach to fish, you feed for a lifetime. And I say to people, I appreciate that and I believe in it. However, I live on a continent where more than 250,000 children die of malnutrition, just malnutrition, nothing else, every single month. Okay. That's the equivalent of almost as many people as what died in the tsunami that happened in Thailand, that the whole world stopped and responded to. Well, that happens every month on our continent. Now, children who are dying from malnutrition, I can't teach them to fish. They die before they learn how. So I have to give them a fish in order to buy myself the time to teach them to fish, but also in order to help their little bodies and brains develop sufficiently that the education I'm giving them on fishing actually works. Okay. And so food security and livelihoods is about teaching people to fish. But then we go into our health and nutrition and food interventions. And those health, nutrition, and food interventions focus more on programs that are actually direct assistance. So those would be providing, for instance, the health and nutrition programs are categorized as such because that's where we focus on a particular health or nutritional outcome. So the reason for our intervention is to create a significant change in the health of that child, or in the specifically from a nutrition perspective. So the nutritional indicators and data of that on that child. So that would be a health and nutrition intervention. What does that mean in layman terms? That means providing therapeutic milk to children in malnutrition clinics that we're involved with, or something called plum peanut, or a similar product, a ready-to-use therapeutic food that is basically like a steroidal mix of peanut butter and powdered milk and all the micronutrients you can imagine. It's a little sachet about this size, and it carries 500 calories. So it's the kind of thing that you and I run away from because our diet says we can't have it, but it's the kind of thing that children who are suffering from severe malnutrition are in desperate need of. It literally is like a nutrition prescription that saves their lives. But then we also do in the food section of that, we're not so much focused on a nutritional health outcome. We're focused on other outcomes that we use food as a significant tool. So they'll have a nutritional component, but something like school feeding, for instance, where we help hundreds of thousands of children in school feeding programs, those are designed more around other outcomes. So it's about education, getting children to enroll in school, keeping them in school. Interesting stat, if we can keep young girls in school for all of their primary school time, so the first sort of 5 or 6 years, or 5 or 6 grades, so to say, I think it's 7 actually, we are able to delay the age that young girls get married at in many African communities by as many as 7 to 10 years. Okay, so I mean that makes a huge difference to their whole life. Okay. So school feeding is not just about education or about food. It is about that, but it's also about educating young girls, delaying when young girls get married, keeping young girls out of child labor, keeping them out of high-risk activities, sexual exploitation and things like that. So by operating a school feeding program, we're able to do that. And then the last pillar for us is water and sanitation programming. And there we drill wells and we provide solutions to bring fresh, clean water to communities, to bring water that can be used also for food security and livelihood activities, though, for agriculture and for livestock. But the core focus of that is bringing fresh, clean water for household use, for drinking. Other than oxygen, there's nothing we need more to stay alive than water. So we provide the water, but we also do it in a very sustainable way where we develop water committees in those in each village where we provide water solutions. We train them on how to maintain the water wells. We ensure that we're training on hygiene and water usage, etc., so that we're able to maximize the impact, but also the sustainability of those water solutions. So I know it's a long answer, Tracy, to the question, but as you said, it's kind of so hard to capture it. So if you take all of those programs, we operate in 7 different African countries, and we are meeting the needs on a daily basis of somewhere in the region of 1.4 million people every single day across those 7 countries in Africa.
That's amazing. When I first heard about Jam, and in our house we call it Team Red Bull. I still have.
Yeah.
I got to bring home an old bowl that they just let me have because I wanted to keep it. It's on our mantle because it provides an opportunity to tell about what you do. But like I said, my son and I were privileged to go join Isak and his team in a couple different countries. And when he's talking about the education and feeding the kids at school, the kids go to school to be fed. So otherwise, like you're saying, they'd be out working and doing things. And a lot of those kids, that's the only meal they get in the day, right?
Yeah. No, for many of them, it's their only meal. And for a lot of children, it's the only meal that has any, real proteins in it or micronutrients in it. So, even if they are getting other food, most times it's very poor nutrition. So they're not nutrient dense foods, very little protein. We all know how important protein is for our brains to grow, our bodies to grow, muscles to grow, but also a lack of micronutrients. And, what people don't realize is people think that when you say a child died of malnutrition, they think, oh, they starved to death. No, you can have sufficient quantity of food and still suffer from malnutrition and even die from malnutrition. Because it's a lack of nutrition. It's not necessarily a lack of quantity of food. And so it's a combination of actually providing both quantity, but more importantly, the micronutrients and the proteins, the quality in the food, as we would say.
Yeah, we in America, I say we live in the Disney world of the world because we have no concept, we have no concept of what that looks like. We were able to go to one of the plumpy nut plants where you all make the nut. We call almond butter in our house plumpy nut because it's just, I love almond butter, but we still call it plumpy nut. It's just so amazing. But you'll see these little kids running around, and I remember that some of the workers pointing out that their hair changes color when they're not getting the nutrients. And once you see that, and you see all the kids running around playing, and their hair is a different color because they're just not getting what they need. It's heartbreaking.
No, absolutely. Their hair changes color. Their bellies get really extended. I mean, I'll show you a picture or two here. Actually, while you're talking about that, I think it's quite relevant to. You should be seeing. Are you seeing those pictures of Xavier on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so let me just click that so that it's clearer to see. But I mean, this is a story of a little guy, Xavier, that you can kind of see the effects that you're talking about. So see how his hair's changed color, but actually the hair has fallen out, a lot of it. And, people think this is like burns or something on his skin. What actually starts to happen with children like this that are suffering from severe malnutrition is that their bodies actually die from the outside in. So because there's so little nutrition in the body, the body shuts down anything that is not essential, so to say. So your heart, your lungs, your kidney, your liver, those things are all essential to life. Your skin is not as essential. I mean, ultimately it is, but it's not as essential. So the skin starts to die, and literally, I mean, it starts peeling off. It's so sad to see. And so, this is a story of little Xavier who I was actually with him in just in February this year in a malnutrition clinic in Angola, and I remember looking at this kid, and I mean, we were doing everything we could in this clinic to help him, but really being extremely concerned that he wasn't gonna make it because of the condition that he was in. And so the first two pictures there are actually pictures of when we were with him in the clinic. The last picture on the right is the same little guy. So this is Xavier a few months later.
Wow.
So, that I love showing these three pictures because they just capture an excuse. They're not neatly put out on a slide. They were just thrown on the slide quickly, but they just capture, for me, it captures the reality of what we do in this space. Those first two pictures show two things to me. The one in the center shows the incredibly painful and heartbreaking effect that happens to a little child's life when they suffer from malnutrition, simply a lack of nutrition. I mean, something so simple to solve. This is not like COVID that we don't have a vaccine for. We have the vaccine for this. It's nutrition, it's micronutrients, it's protein, it's a balanced diet. It's something so simple to be able to give to this child. In fact, we can do that for a child like this, particularly if we reach them before they get into a severely malnourished state, where we're not having to use expensive products to try and rescue their life. We're able to keep children in the villages away from getting into this level for $5 a month. I mean, that's when I say that to people, they go, "What?" Say, "Yeah, we've got the vaccine, and the vaccine costs $5 a month." Okay, people go, "No, come on." So then, why are 250,000 children every month dying in the condition this child is in? And it's because we don't have enough people who are saying, "Well, I'll give that $5 a month. I'll wind the clock back by one child at a time." And so the first picture for me captures the individual suffering. The second picture of me sitting on the bed with a mother, for me, captures two things. It captures, firstly, the pain that parents in Africa go through, or anywhere else in the world, when they lose a child in poverty. And I think sometimes, Tracy, we have this strange perception that somebody who's living in poverty, or maybe somebody who lives in Africa, or whatever it is that affects the way we see it, or the lens we see it through, that somehow they feel differently when they lose a child. Almost like, well, they are expected to lose one or two children, so it can't be as impactful. Well, you're a mom, I'm a dad. I can't imagine. I mean, I've asked God, like, if you do one thing for me in my whole life, please let me die before my children. Okay. Because I just cannot imagine losing a child. Well, that mother sitting on that bed feels exactly like you and I do, and like every other parent everywhere else in the world. And so there is such an intense pain and struggle and fear and anxiety for mothers in these villages who aren't able to provide enough for their children. It's not because they choose not to. It's because they aren't able to. If they had the $5 a month, they would do it, trust me, okay? But they don't have, and so they can't. And so there's an incredible pain, but also a fear and anxiety that comes with that. But the other part that picture represents, with me sitting on the bed, and it's not because it's me, but is the lifeline that can be extended by just extending our hands, by just expressing a heart of compassion, by extending that hand and saying, "I'll do what I can do." Because if I do what I can do, I can save one life, or maybe two, or maybe 10, or maybe 100, or maybe 100,000. When my dad started JAM, he didn't have a vision that he'd be saving, close to 1.5 million lives every month, or every day. He had a vision that he would help the people that he had found in Mozambique, the 30,000 people that were suffering, the 300 that had died in the week that he was in that refugee camp. And he didn't want another 300 to die the next week. That was his focus, to do whatever he could do to help those few individuals, okay, and rescue them. But look where that's gone. And so for me, that picture just captures that we have the power. Each and every one of us can do something We have the power to change the world. And I think so often whenever I'm talking with young people, I share this because I think all of us have this dream and this vision, but more so when we're younger. I think we get tainted as we get older. But when we're young, we have this drive. I want to change the world. I'm going to be a world changer, a history maker. Okay. And then we come up, somehow we lose that. We get tainted. We feel like, well, can I really change the world? And to me, my answer to that is yes. Because the way I believe we change the world is by changing one life at a time. By saving this child's life, which somebody did by contributing and which we were able to do by being there, for us, I believe we changed this child's world, and we changed this child's mother's world, and we changed this child's whole family's world. You can see in the third picture there's a sibling as well. We changed their world, okay? Well, that makes us world changers, okay? You don't have to change everybody in the world's life to change the world. You just need to change one at a time. And soon you'll be changing 10,000 and 100,000 and 1,000,000 and more. And so, the third picture, of course, captures the success of when we do this, when we get there in time, when we're able to reach these children, when we're able to provide that intervention that is so easy yet so difficult to provide, because it's easy in the individual. It's easy at $5, but on the scale that we need to do it, it sometimes feels insurmountable. But when we do that, that last picture captures the success of that is achieved. A healthy, chubby young boy who, has a new lease of life, and a mother who can smile again because she doesn't have the anxiety and fear of potentially losing her child.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have guessed that that's the same child in those pictures.
It's amazing, eh? It's amazing. You can't believe that it's actually the same boy. Yeah.
No.
Incredible.
Can you tell us quickly, I know it's a much longer story, but you brought up your dad and how he started JAM, and I just love the story because it was an accident, right? He wasn't intended to be where he was. Yeah.
So my dad had gone to Mozambique. He was actually working with churches. He was doing gospel outreach work in South Africa, and was passionate about, as an evangelist, about preaching the gospel. And he went to Mozambique actually to try and do the same, to work with churches there and to start doing gospel outreaches there. This was just after the peace agreement was signed between South Africa and Mozambique. So, understand, this is in the height of the apartheid era in South Africa. South Africa under apartheid time and Mozambique were enemies, okay, because Mozambique at the time was a Marxist country. So it was seen as this communist Marxist force. The apartheid South Africa, of course, also was having a constant, ongoing, almost war, so to say, against the ANC, led by Nelson Mandela, who we all know, who finally set our country free, actually, and brought freedom to South Africa. But so Mozambique looked after many ANC leaders and would allow them to be in exile in Mozambique, etc. So there was great tension between our two countries. Finally, there was a peace agreement signed. My dad was a bit of a maverick, Tracy. He just, my dad was not ordinary, okay? He had grown up extremely poor himself. So my dad used to steal milk and bread every day almost for his family for many years as a youngster. And he knew what it was to be poor. I think he lived in 23 different homes by the time he was 18 years old. So, just understood, because they got kicked out all the time. They couldn't pay their rent. He understood what it was to be poor. But he also, had made a real success of his life after that in business and had done really well. And then, started getting involved in the ministry. And so he got in his car about a month or so after the peace agreement was signed and drove to Mozambique, drove to Maputo. Well, Mozambique at the time was in the middle of a civil war. And so they it was raging civil war going on there. My dad got in his car, he drove across the border from South Africa to Mozambique. And he said he realized when he crossed the border that he had probably made a mistake. He said, because there were trucks burning on the side of the road. He said it literally was a war zone. Anyway, he pushed on through because my dad was not normal. And he got to Maputo. And then he started meeting different people and connecting with different people. And he ended up with Minister Shizano, who later became the president of Mozambique. But at that time, he was the foreign minister, and they called him Minister of Cooperation and Foreign Affairs. And so my dad met with him, and my dad said, well, I want to come and work with churches here, and I want to, preach the gospel of Jesus. And the guy was very polite, but he kind of looked at my dad and said, you do know we're a Marxist country, Mr. Pretorius. He said, if you preach the gospel anywhere here, we're going to put you in jail. So my dad was kind of discouraged, but he felt an urgency in his heart, like God was telling him to just say to this to Mr. Shizano, well, how can I help you? So he asked that question. And Minister Shizano then explained to my dad that 300,000 people had starved to death in the first 4 months of that year in Mozambique. They were experiencing a famine in the middle of their civil war that was very similar to what was going on in Ethiopia at a similar time. So they had civil war and an incredible drought combined. And so many, many people starving to death. And of course, because they were a Marxist country, this is the middle of the Cold War time, the Western world was not exposing in the media what was happening in Mozambique. It was kind of cut off. And so he said to my dad, he said, we don't have much foreign aid. He said, you said you're a farmer and, whatever you can do to help us feed our people. So my dad asked to see. He said, I want to see what you're talking about. I need to see it to understand it properly. So they put him in a government aircraft and they flew him up to the middle of the country, and they took him about 40 minutes inland to a camp for internally displaced people. It was supposed to be a food and a camp for people in a safe haven. Well, there was no food there. There was no clean water even. But there were 30,000 people, IDPs, internally displaced people like refugees that had gathered there. And so they dropped my dad off. The pilot said to my dad, I'll come back and collect you this evening. There's no fuel at this airport. I've got to go to another airport, get fuel and come back. So my dad just had a lunchbox and a couple of bottles of water for the day. He was going for the day to sea. The aircraft never came back for 10 days. And my dad lived in this camp for 10 days in the middle of war-torn Mozambique with 30,000 people there who were all at some level of suffering from starvation, malnutrition, etc. And in the week that he was there, he helped bury more than 300 people that died, literally starved to death. They just dug mass trenches and just buried people in trench graves. And first of all, it broke my dad's heart. But secondly, it transformed his life, and it transformed the life of our family forever, to be honest, because my dad was confronted with one of two decisions, as he used to explain it. He said, I had to choose. Either I was going to try and forget what I had seen and get on with my life, or I was going to have to dedicate the rest of my life to doing something about this. Okay. And fortunately, he made the second decision. And something else significant happened that day, which kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about us doing whatever we can do. My dad called out to God and he said, I don't know why I'm here. I know my heart's broken, and I don't know what you want me to do about this. And he said he felt this overwhelming sense of do whatever you can do and I'll be with you. And so that became a mantra for my dad for the rest of his life. Do whatever you can do to help these people, and God will be with you. And I think we've seen that in the broader context of people being with us, people like yourself, your family, getting behind who we are and supporting us and helping us to reach more of those children, to save more of those lives, to have a greater impact, to develop communities in a way that means that we can guard against children ever getting to that state, because that's ultimately what we need to do, and continue to build on that foundation. And so that's really continued to be such a driver in our organization, that we really, we constantly are trying to do more, help more, stretch every dollar further, because we know that if we do whatever we can do, that people will be with us, that God will be with us, we believe, and that we'll be able to achieve a great impact.
Well, clearly that's the case, because you said you're in 7 countries. Is that right?
Yeah, 7 countries on the continent. Yeah.
I mean, and it started in Mozambique. So clearly, it's such a great story, because you just very often especially younger people, what am I going to do with my life? What's the purpose? And your dad didn't plan for his world to get rocked that week.
No.
He was going to go, but then he got dropped off, and it all changed.
Yeah. He never went looking for his purpose. His purpose found him.
Yeah, that's right.
And it transformed his life. And it allowed him to achieve such amazing things on our continent and have such a significant impact. So when he was writing his book, we were kind of playing with titles for the book. It ended up being called Death Defying Faith, which was kind of how my dad lived his life. He believed he could achieve anything. But one of the other titles was One Life, because it was just that principle of what can be achieved with one life when you actually dare to believe that you can change the world, when you dare to believe that you can have a significant impact. And I think that's such an important message. I convey that to my children all the time. Guys, you can change the world. You can, and it's not that sort of, no, it's not a rah-rah. It's a genuine belief of when we dedicate ourselves to something significant and to something that is bigger than us and more important than ourselves only. We every single human, I believe, is able to change the world.
Well, and I want to keep saying it over and over so we can drive this point home. $5 a month. I mean, that's nothing. That's not, that doesn't even get you a Starbucks drink.
Exactly.
Cheaper than Starbucks. So we're just going to say that over and over. And it's in case people don't make it to the end of the webinar, what's your website that they could go to sign up to do that?
So they can go to jamint.com, just jamint.com. I always give that one because then no matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to, you'll click on the USA and you'll go to the USA website and be able to donate in the US or Canada or the UK or different places around the world. So just jamint, jamint.com, and they'll be able to connect with us there, to donate there, to see more about what we're doing. And basically that $5 that we're talking about, Tracy, that fills that. There's one of those red bowls you were talking about. Okay. And I mean, I just love this picture because it captures the gains. I mean, a picture truly does, I don't think it says 1,000 words. It's millions when you look at this picture, to see the smile on that young child's face. Looking into that bowl, knowing he knows what that bowl means. Okay, he might not know who gave the $5 that filled it for the month, but he knows what that bowl means to his life. Okay, and so this picture, just that joy, that security that is in that smile, is something so significant. That building behind him is his school. So, he's going to school, he's being educated at the same time as receiving the nutrition he needs. And that will guard against him ever suffering from malnutrition because we keep giving him that bowl of food each and every day. And so that's really what that $5 represents. It represents that bowl of food filled every single day for a whole month. And, that's what's... it's $60 a year, and that actually is providing for a full year for that child.
I love that. That picture, I always could just go back to the places that we went with you all, and I was just always amazed at how little they have, but they were so happy. They were so happy and they were so welcoming, and I don't
Yeah.
know. It was
Yeah.
it was the singing. What we very often I danced with one of the villages. I think it was in Mozambique, and that will pop up on my social media, and everybody laughs at my white girl dancing. But it was a great. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
So we were talking before we started, Isak, about COVID and how that has affected you all. So in America, we had a little bit of well, it was kind of dependent on where you lived, how long your shutdown is. You said you're still under shutdown, and it started in March.
Yeah, so we're still under a form of lockdown. So we went into our lockdown, they gave it levels. So and different African countries were different. But here in South Africa, we went into what was called level 5 lockdown at first, which literally meant you were not allowed to leave your home unless you were going to the hospital or a doctor, or you were going to buy groceries. So you could go to a grocery store, you could go to a doctor, or if you were declared your job or your work was declared an essential service, so nurses and doctors, we were declared essential service as JAM because, I mean, what we do is directly impacting on saving lives, protecting lives, educating people on COVID, etc. So those were the only people that were really allowed to move around. You were not allowed to visit family. You were not allowed to. So in other words, whoever wasn't living in your home, you were not allowed to see them. Okay. And there were severe restrictions on any form of movement. Then they went into a level 4 and a level 3, and now we're in level 2. So for the first time, literally as of midnight last night, for the first time, we're actually allowed to visit family members.
Wow.
So we haven't been able to do that since March. So if they weren't living with you, you weren't allowed to visit with them. And, a number of other restrictions have got a lot less. But for instance, we're still not allowed to travel outside of South Africa. So, I mean, I normally I spend my life on an airplane and traveling all over Africa and around the world. And so it's felt quite strange for me. I've been locked down here in Johannesburg. I haven't been able to leave South Africa since March. But thank goodness we've got such amazing teams that run our programs in the various different countries. And thank God for technology like this. So we're able to connect with those teams as well, and have been able to really keep our programs running.
It's just, when you said that, I was trying to picture what lockdown would look like for JAM, because I mean, you have to be out there. You have to be out there feeding and doing things. Has it caused any issues? I mean, what does a pandemic look like in Africa? Because most people picture it's kind of an ongoing pandemic there all the time, right? And then you throw another thing on top of it.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
So, I think a couple of key things. In Africa, our resilience to shocks is far less than in somewhere like America. Okay. So I think that's the first really significant thing is, people are living at a level where they're far less resilient to any shock. Okay. Secondly, we have an environment where our healthcare systems are just woefully inadequate at the best of times. Okay. So now you throw a pandemic on top of that. Well, I mean, you already had a health system that wasn't coping, and so significant impact. A lot of poverty on our continent is caused because of limited economic activity at the end of the day, and strain on the economies, underperforming economies. And of course, COVID has really affected that. So it's put even more pressure on the economy. We've seen less economic activity. So in South Africa, for instance, we've had more than 3 million people lose their jobs since the beginning of COVID. So, that's 3 million people, many of which were earning, minimum wages before, and were really struggling already, that are now without any work at all. Okay, so what does that mean for us as JAM? Well, to give you an idea, here in South Africa, pre-COVID, we were helping 121,000 odd children every day. So our beneficiary number in South Africa for the whole country was 121,000 children, and that was spread across every state pretty much in the country. We are currently needing to assist more than 450,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So, and those are just directly linked, families, etc., to the beneficiaries that we were helping before. Okay. So that gives you an idea of the impact, So for every one we were helping before, we're now having to help 4 to 5 people. So that's the kind of multiplier that this sort of, that a pandemic of this nature can have in our environment. And that is different, but also very similar at the end of the day in its impact and effect in most other African countries. Look, South Africa has had the highest number of COVID cases by quite far. I mean, I think we're now the 4th or 5th highest in the world, actually. Yeah. So, and if you think we only have a population of just somewhere around 55 million people, the fact that we 4th or 5th highest in the total infections anywhere in the world is really high, because that's a very high percentage of our population compared to many other countries. And so other African countries have been less affected. Some have had very limited effect, but others have had significant impact. And so we've had to scale up a lot of what we're doing. I mean, to give you an idea, our responses, in responding, a lot of the responses has needed to be food. So of course there's been education response. We've done a lot of water response, because how can you teach people they need to wash their hands if they haven't got any water, clean water to wash their hands in? Okay. Well, we all know that just one of the basic ways to protect ourselves against COVID is washing our hands. Well, you can't exercise good hygiene if you don't have clean water. So we've really responded with water programs. We've responded with a lot of education, but our number one biggest response has had to be food, because people are just suffering from an increased level of food insecurity or lack of food, because they've lost their job. There's just less available to them. So we've actually distributed just over 80 million meals since mid-March until now, in response to COVID. So, we're hugely grateful that we've been in the position and that our donors around the world have responded the way they have and have got behind us and helped us. We've actually acquired many new donors, companies that never sponsored us before, individuals that were not supporting JAM before, that have been exposed to what we're doing during COVID and have really got behind us. And so we're massively grateful for the response of our donors, many of whom are suffering themselves. So many of whom have lost income themselves, and yet they've said, well, I know I'm not in as bad a condition as JAM's beneficiaries are, so I'll do whatever I can do to help them. And that's made it possible for us to distribute those, over 80 million meals since the beginning of the pandemic. We're nowhere near the end of the impact. We've been saying, and this isn't just an emotional statement. I mean, we know this from working in other pandemics like Ebola in the past and so on. In Africa, food insecurity related to the economic impact and other impact of COVID is going to cause way more deaths than the virus itself, way more. And so, we're very aware of that, but we're also aware of the fact that impact is longer lasting. Those 3 million people in South Africa that have lost their jobs, just because COVID goes away doesn't mean they get their job back. So the impact from a poverty perspective is going to be far deeper and longer lasting than the impact of the actual virus itself from a health perspective. And so that's something that we're really concerned about. and that we're doing everything we can to ensure that we're not just responding now, but that we are working together with donors and partners all over the world to say, let's be responsible in our response to make sure that there is a sustainability and longevity to our response, so that we're not helping people now at the expense of not being able to help them in a few months' time when they're still going to be desperately in need.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just going to have a much longer, like you said, it's going to be a longer road.
Yeah.
Because when you start on first base, it takes you longer to, well, I'm talking baseball.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I get it. I get it. I've watched enough. We love going to baseball games, so I've watched enough baseball to get the analogy.
Yeah. But when you're in an African village, you're in the dugout. You're not even anywhere close to second base, and you still need to get home. So it's just pushing it further back.
You're in the dugout, and somebody needs to give you a bat and a ball because you can't afford to buy your own one. It's literally at that level. And yet on the other side, Tracy, we've seen, it's amazing how in the midst of crisis and turmoil, you see, yes, often the worst of humanity, but you also see the best of humanity. You see families that have nothing that we're helping, and we might not be helping their neighbor, and they'll share what they get with their neighbor, even though they know that means that they're going to be going without some days. They'll actually share it with their neighbor to help their neighbor. And that sort of thing just gives you faith in humanity, and in the spirit, the human spirit, and the fact that we're all connected as a community. And that is something I love about, our continent and about us as African people. As African people, we have a deep sense of community and a deep understanding of our interconnectedness with one another. And the fact that, it doesn't matter what religion you are, it doesn't matter what political party you support or what political persuasion you come from, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. We are all connected, and we all need one another in one way or another. And if we understand that and we live our lives in that way, we're able to sustain each other and to have an incredible impact on one another's lives. And so for me, this pandemic has had many negatives, but it's also had many positives. Even for us as an organization, it's forced us as JAM to innovate at a far faster rate than what we were innovating before, because suddenly things got shut down. I mean, give you an idea, we do a lot of school feeding. We feed hundreds of thousands of children in school. Well, they shut all the schools down. So we couldn't feed in schools anymore. So we had to come up with mechanisms to be able to feed. Well, now the immediate response was put together food hampers and distribute those to families. Well, that sounds like a great idea until you've got a 1 mile long line of people lined up to collect food hampers. And suddenly now there's no social distancing. There's, so you're contributing potentially actually to increasing infection rates. There's violence that starts to go on because there's not enough food for everyone, but they can see the line of people who are going to get food today. So people start attacking food trucks, and just so security becomes an issue. And there's so many other factors that are there. Scalability. How do you reach all of these families with long food lines and food hamper distributions? And so we ended up having to innovate, and we actually put together, I didn't sleep for about 2 weeks. I worked with a tech team from London and Australia, which is the beauty of technology. We connected people from all around the world. We built a vouchering system and an app to run our distributions in the space of 2 weeks. Okay, and then launch that app. So now what we're able to do, because thank goodness for mobile phone penetration in Africa, a lot of people don't have a smartphone, but they do have a basic mobile phone. Okay, And so what we did was we built a system whereby we could register beneficiaries into our system, and we could then send them an SMS, a text message. Okay, so they would get a text message that would say, there's a food hamper available for you. This is a voucher for your food hamper. Please collect it on this day from this location. And so what we were able to do by doing that was we were able to control and eradicate the lines. Because now you can stagger people when they're collecting, and you can control that. You're also able to improve security because you're not having one location with long lines with lots of food, and it's also not evident to people where food is being distributed on any given day because people are coming one by one redeeming their voucher. And so we built this system. We issue the text message. They then take that text message to the center that they've been allocated to collect from, which is geolocated. So when we register them, we register a location of where they're at. Many people don't have addresses because they're living in a tin shack, but we just take a GPS log of that when we register them as a beneficiary. And so we're able to geolocate them, that their distribution point where they're redeeming their voucher is within walking distance of where their home is. And so they can just walk down the road and they can go and present their voucher gets scanned. So the redemption point has our app, our Jam app on their device. So now what this allowed us to do was that we didn't have to be running every single distribution point. So we started partnering because one of the other impacts is so many people losing their jobs. Suddenly now there's an influx of food hampers being distributed. So the small trading businesses, the small grocery trader and so on, they're all started going out of business. Well, part of what we try and do as Jam is to operate from a point of view that says do no harm. So, we're now creating a longer food line because we're putting the small trader out of business, okay? And you could say, well, COVID did. Yes, it did. But still, how do we try and help that? So what we did was we partnered with those small traders. We partnered with the daycare centers that we provide nutritional assistance to children in, who were now not able to operate. And that meant they weren't getting paid for those children to come to the daycare center. So they couldn't survive any longer. Now I say daycare center and you get a different picture to what I know. Again, it's often just a tin shack where a lady's looking after 10 children and somebody's paying her maybe 50 US cents a week to look after her kids, or a day, or whatever, but still that's an income for that lady. And so we partnered with those small traders, with those daycare centers, and so they download our app, beneficiaries get allocated to them, we deliver the food commodities there, and they pack the hampers, or we deliver complete hampers if they can't pack. And they then have our app on their phone, they redeem the voucher, and they issue the food hamper. The beneficiary then gets another text message that says, please confirm you redeemed your voucher at this location today and you received your food hamper and that these items were in the hamper. So now we have an ability to confirm that every single family that we issued a food hamper to actually gets it. And secondly, that all of the items were there. So we can guard against theft and side selling of things, etc. But what it also allowed us to do was those small traders and daycare centers, etc., that partnered with us, we paid them a small amount per voucher that they redeemed for their services. So we were able to now contribute towards creating employment at a time where so many millions of people were losing their jobs. But that didn't cost us anything extra to do, because if we were running that distribution point, we would have had to have paid staff, etc., to run it. So what it allowed us to do was go to scale much more rapidly than what we normally would have, to ensure proof of impact and verification around what we were doing, but also to provide jobs to people at the same time, and therefore to be able to reach many more beneficiaries than we would normally have been able to reach. And so we partnered with one of the largest grocery retailers in the country and with one of the biggest logistics businesses in the country, and they all waived their margins. And so we were then using the formal grocery retail supply chain to actually help augment our humanitarian efforts as JAM. And so bringing business together, bringing local partners together, and being able to all work hand in hand, many times using money that was coming from a donor, sitting in America, who may never ever get to see one of these families whose life they've saved and changed. So it really is a cool story of how COVID has had many negatives, but it's also had some powerful positives that will be long lasting.
Wow, that is crazy. I can imagine that you didn't sleep for 2 weeks getting that set up.
No, it was kind of crazy, but it was great to see it in action.
Yeah. Are you still feeding that way?
Yeah. So we're running the voucher system every single day at the moment. So yeah.
Kids back in school yet then, out in the village?
So they've just opening schools again now. So kids are getting back into school. Some of the other countries' schools are still closed. Some they've been open. So Angola's been open for a while now, for instance. And so we've gone back to school feeding there. But for many months, we were doing take-home rations for those children as well. So different countries are on a different time scale.
So do you think that'll change the way that you feed? Can you utilize that system and the school somehow? And I don't know,
Absolutely.
It seems like it might add some more organization to it, as well as the accountability.
Absolutely. So, think of it in this way. So traditionally, we would run all of our own logistics. We would have to have warehouses everywhere, trucks everywhere. We would have to go to each of those schools and deliver food. Well, now what we're going to be able to do with the voucher system, not in all scenarios, but in many of them, is partner with a formal retail supply chain. So let me put it into an American context. Picture having a Walmart in a rural community, and there's a school with 1,000 children in that school that are all, from impoverished families that really they've met all of our criteria to qualify as beneficiaries for our school feeding program. Well, what we could do now, the system, and will be doing going forward, is we'll partner with a formal retail sector at no margin from them, which actually means that many times we can procure the food commodities way cheaper than we would be able to buy them anyway. But we can use their supply chain, which brings our costs down, also brings our capital requirements down, makes it possible for us to grow programs faster. And so we will issue a voucher to the school parent-teacher association that is our partner in running the school feeding program. We would issue them a weekly voucher. They would go to that local store and redeem the voucher for the commodities that they need to use to fill those red bowls. Okay. And then they prepare them, etc., and they do the daily feeding in the schools. And we're able to monitor all of that, both on the electronic platform, but then we have staff that visit every single one of those schools on a rotational basis every month. And so we're verifying all of the data. Now, what this will be able to do is bring our staff requirement down from a logistics perspective, etc., make our supply chain far cheaper to run, and therefore mean that we can stretch our dollars further and help more people with the same quantum of funding. And so it's allowing us to be far more efficient. But now picture a couple of iterations down the road where, let's say your family said, well, no, we love the red bowl and filling that, but we actually also want to help a local family in Angola with a agricultural starter kit and some training in agriculture, etc., so that they can become more self-sufficient, okay, and produce for themselves and end up selling in the local market, etc. Well, you could then go on and buy a voucher for that family, and we will issue that voucher on your behalf to that family for their agricultural start. So they'll get a voucher for their starter kit. They'll get a voucher for their training. They'll get a voucher for their fertilizers and so on. I mean, we use organic ones here, but they'll get a voucher for all of those, the things that help them to grow better. They'll also get a voucher, as I say, for the training and extension services. And we'll be able to tell you when that voucher was issued, when it was redeemed, etc. So now you start to feel so much more a part of, but also you feel more assured of the proof of impact that your dollars are going to where we told you they're going to go to. Okay. And so the other side is it allows us far better control in our programs. Because, for instance, if that family doesn't cash in their voucher for their training, we can freeze their vouchers for the other commodities. So you can't access seed if you haven't gone through the training, because then we know you're going to waste the seed. So it allows us to put natural controls in place that they come to redeem their voucher for seed, and the redemption point is, I can't issue you the seed because you haven't redeemed your training voucher yet. So we can also start putting more and more controls in place to improve how we run our programs and the efficiency and effectiveness of those.
Wow. So you have a really big COVID silver lining.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you learned it really fast. You had to.
Well, I kept saying to our teams, as devastating and as negatively impacting as this crisis has been, and it sure has been that. I mean, it's, I think different parts of the world have felt it differently. We've all felt some real negative impact. But, for the families that we serve on a daily basis, I mean, it's been devastating to them. But I said to our team, we've got a choice. We can either live in the middle of that and do whatever we can, or we can take the mindset that says there's no point in wasting a crisis. So let's take this crisis and let's capitalize on all of the development that can happen now. The fact that, we had donors that were prepared to pay for us to develop this voucher system that would never have paid for that before. Okay, so let's capitalize on the crisis, not in a negative way, in a positive way, to say, what are we going to do, rather than throwing our hands up in the air and saying, let's say, okay, well, hang on, what can we do now that we couldn't do before that is going to make us better at what we do what we do in a far more efficient way? Because at the end of the day, what are we, Tracy? We're, as an organization, we are effectively a conduit and a representative. So I am a conduit for your money getting to people who most need it in the most effective and efficient way. Okay. And if we're not that as JAM, then we should stop doing what we're doing. Okay. Because that is actually our reason for existence. We transform, we save lives, we transform lives, and we develop communities by being a conduit of your love and your compassion and your contribution to those communities that we've identified that are most in need and that we can serve best because of the core competence and expertise we've developed that enables us to do that. But at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're a conduit, okay? And secondly, we are your representative to that community, and we are their representative to you, okay? So, that should be driving us to try and be more efficient, more effective, better at what we do every day. And so one of the things that has been such a focus for us and become sort of another mantra and something that we just keep talking about as teams is asking the question constantly of ourselves. In a business context, we use the question, who is your customer? Okay. Because at the end of the day, if you understand as a business who your customer is, then you understand who comes first and foremost in your thinking, in everything you do, okay? Well, businesses don't make their shareholders their customers. Shareholders are shareholders, okay? Shareholders are the ones that contribute the finance that make it possible for the business to do what it does. But the business serves its customer, and the customer comes first. We all know this. And whenever we go in a store and they don't make us feel that way, we're very quick to remind them, I'm the customer. The customer comes first. Okay. Well, that's a good business. A business that has good customer service, that knows what a customer wants and needs, and delivers that to the customer in the most efficient and effective way, is a successful, sustainable business. Now, they have to keep shareholders happy, of course, because shareholders have invested for a reason. Well, why are we any different as a non-profit organization? We shouldn't be any different. We just don't make dollar profits. We make profits in the form of lives saved and communities transformed, okay? Our shareholders are people like yourself, people who are prepared to give out of what you have and make a sacrifice to contribute towards the communities that we're serving, okay? So our donors effectively are our shareholders, but our customer is our beneficiary. And so for us as an organization, our beneficiaries, the families we serve, our customer, has to come first in everything we think, say, and do. And we've been really driving this home as a culture in our organization to say our customer is that child. That child that needs our help is our customer. And we've got to put them first in everything we think, say, and do, because then we will make every effort and do everything we can to maximize the benefit and impact for that customer. Well, by doing that, I'm naturally going to make you as a donor or shareholder of the organization happy. I'm going to be serving you as well. And if I'm not, that's going to mean because I'm the wrong organization for you to be a donor to or a shareholder of, and or you're the wrong person to be contributing to us, because maybe you want to be helping people to, become doctors. Well, we don't train people how to become doctors, so I can never make you happy then. Okay. And so that's really been a core driver for us. We really like to bring. I'm a businessman. My dad was a businessman. We focused on impacting lives, but we really apply good, solid business principle to it, because we believe that the most efficient organizations in the world that provide the best customer service in the world should actually be organizations like JAM, should be the nonprofit community, not the for-profit community.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I like that perspective, because very often, especially in America, we can think that your customers are just people looking for a handout, and that's not the case at all. They have value. They just happen to be born into a situation that's quite different than ours. And I love that you love on them. It's not just, I have to, here you go, but you show them great value. And that's
no, they genuinely are our customer, and we do love on them like a good business would love on their customer, and they're important to us. They really are. So.
That's very evident. We talk a lot about Made Possible, about your community and what defines your community, and your community is an entire continent. You have, that's such a huge impact with JAM, and I really appreciate that. I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll tie up. We've gone a little bit long. I'm sorry about that. So you were talking about companies that have come alongside that normally wouldn't have, that maybe the crisis raised their awareness. We love to share the good that companies do in their communities. We say we like to make their good loud, because we think it's important for people to know, and not just their customers to know it, but for their whole community to know the impact that they're having. Would you agree with that statement? In the businesses that you have that come partner with them, do you love to toot their horn, so to speak?
Absolutely. We do it at every opportunity we get, because it's, I think that it's not just good for business. or good for us as a nonprofit to be thanking our donors and to be exposing to others, the impact that they're having. I actually think that it's a good practice in the sense that it should be reinforcing the role that business has in the world. So, part of the role that business has is to reinvest into communities, to invest as businesses into our future markets. Okay. Well, what is Africa? Africa, for many businesses, is a future market. It's a current market. It's a future market. It's a way of them being able to say thank you to their customer. Many of the families we're helping, they're still buying products from businesses. So those same businesses can say thank you to them by spending their social development or social response budgets in that way. And so I think sometimes people say, oh, well, companies should just write the check and they should never claim credit and they should never. Well, what's going to then incentivize the staff in that business to keep supporting who their business is? To me, if you're working in a business where you're constantly hearing about what that business is doing for the community, you're going to feel proud to be a part of that business, okay? You're going to stay committed to that business. Well, what does that mean? That means that business is going to be more successful. Well, part of that success is going to mean that that business can sustain what it's doing for the community or even do more, okay? And it's going to make the customers of that business feel good about that business, okay? And so, and I think this is one of the beauties of the upcoming generation. Like I see with, my daughter's 14 years old. Something that's really important to her is that the company she buys things from is doing things for their community. She would rather buy the product from another company if that company isn't, even if she prefers their product, okay? Because she doesn't prefer their value system. And so, well, how is the customer going to know if the company can't talk about it, or we as a nonprofit don't expose what they're doing and make a big deal about it? And so, as an organization, we are constantly looking for opportunities to shout out loud, okay, about what the companies that support us are doing and the sacrifices that they're making. I mean, a great American business, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, they're one of our largest supporters here in South Africa. And they provide millions of meals every year in South Africa to children who desperately need them in partnership with us, and have just been such an incredible partner. Well, we want to sing their praises. We want to talk about what they're doing because we want them to be able to continue doing it and to do more of it. But we also just want their customers to be proud of them. When their customer goes into one of their stores and makes a purchase, we want their customer to be proud of the company that they're supporting.
No, we 100% agree. We 100% agree. And I love your daughter's perspective. We see that here too. It's not just that they want to spend their dollars, but they also want to work for places. They want to see that they're what they're committing their life to is to an organization who cares about their community. So I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. So, Isak, I want to go back to the $5. We got to wrap up. We got to say that as much as we can. $5 a month feeds a child. So $60 for a whole year will feed a child for a whole year. But I want to give you opportunity. What would be your 30-second, 60-second shout out, call to action, whatever? How do you inspire us Americans?
So maybe I'll share two little pictures here as I do that shout out, because these are shifting things a little from food to water, something just as critically or even more critically needed at times. And I guess what I would like to communicate is coming back to where we started, of the fact that every single individual can do something. Every single individual can be a world changer because you change the world by changing one life at a time. And if that is $5 that fills that red bowl and allows us to reach a child with nutrition for a month and save their life and transform their life and bring them education, that's awesome. But it might also be providing water to a community. And I love these two pictures because they kind of capture for me something so significant, in the sense that if you look at this picture, you see the scenario when we are absent, okay? The dry, parched earth, the lack of water, a child carrying something that should contain water but doesn't, a child that shouldn't actually having to be walking miles to collect water, but at least should be able to get clean water when they do. And yet that is not the scenario in that picture. That is a beautifully taken photograph of an incredibly tragic scenario, okay? And yet when we look at the next picture, what we see is what happens when we respond. When we simply do what we can and should do. Because by doing that, we transform that whole picture. So this is a little child washing their hands in clean water at one of our programs in a similar area. And they're now able to access clean water for their family, for that little life to be sustained and given an opportunity to grow and thrive. I'm not asking people to contribute towards giving something fancy to someone. I'm asking for a contribution that literally takes that dry, desolate earth and transforms that into a life-giving scenario where there's fresh, clean water flowing, or there's a bowl of food being filled every day, or there's a family receiving what they need to be able to help themselves and sustain themselves. And so I really just want to encourage everybody that each and every one of us can do something. But when we do that, what we're doing is, because I think often people say to me, well, I can't do much, so it's not going to make much of a difference, okay? I don't think it's about that. I think it's about doing whatever we can do, because when we do that, we ignite a process of transformation and change. And when we do that, we actually do something for ourselves at the same time as doing something for those that we're helping. And by triggering that, we transform it. Mother Teresa was asked, someone said to her one day, they said, Mother, what you do is amazing work. They said, but, it's just a drop in a bucket. And she stopped and she said, no, it's not. It's a drop in the ocean. But if I didn't do it, there'd be one less drop. Okay. And that is the reality. It's not about changing every life in the world. It's not about reaching all the needs. It's about doing whatever we can do to transform that one individual life, to have that impact on that one life, and to allow the opportunity for each and every child like the one on our screen here to be given that chance to actually grow and thrive. And so that's really the message I would like to leave everyone with. Yeah.
Thank you, Isak. I so appreciate what you all do on a day-to-day basis. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to think about, and I'm sure you feel that very often, that it's overwhelming. I'm thankful that you have a great team that can help you. But again, give us your website and one more time so people know where to go.
Yeah, so jamint.com. So jamint.com.
int.com. $5 a year, $5 a month, or $60 a year feeds a child. And then give us a ballpark of water, how someone could help if water was something on their hearts.
Yeah, so for $20, every $20 contribution transforms those two pictures on the screen. So when you give $20, you allow us to provide fresh, clean water to an individual. So for every $20 contribution, you're bringing fresh, clean water to an individual life. And I mean, we all know how transformational that is.
Mm-hmm. So when they go to jamint.com, they can choose water, they can choose food. Can they
Mm-hmm.
choose where in the continent that it goes?
Yeah, so there's an ability to just put a designation there, so they could say they wanted to go to Angola or South Sudan or one of the particular countries of operation, or they could say, I just want to contribute towards water, anywhere where it's needed most, then they just make that donation. Or they can make a general donation to say, well, I want to give a once-off donation or a monthly donation, but I want you to be able to use it where it's most needed, and it will then be directed into the right country, the right intervention, etc. So there's a multiplicity of options there, and so I always encourage people, give to the thing that you're most passionate about, because the reality is that when you make that gift, you're not giving finances, you're not giving a bowl of food, you're not giving access to water. What you're actually really giving is hope. And hope is not a nice to have. Hope is a game changer. When you give someone hope, think of a time in your life where you felt hopeless, okay? And someone maybe came along and gave you hope in that scenario, gave you a ray of light. It's truly transformational. And so that is what every single gift does. It brings hope, it gives hope. And it's hope at the most fundamental grassroots level, which is, where lives are saved because of food, because of water, because of those other interventions that we do.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just for that child. It provides hope, just like you showed in the picture with Xavier's family, for the whole family, for that mother. Mm-hmm. It's a much broader reach. So
yeah.
Again, thank you, Isak. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today. I want to thank all of our viewers as well for joining us. We love making good loud. We love sharing stories of organizations and businesses that are making impacts in their community, because just like Isak said, it's so important to just do one thing. One little thing today. Maybe you're the only person that when you smile at this person, that might be the only smile that person sees today. But that makes a big difference in their life. So don't think your small things don't matter, because they do. They add up, definitely. Absolutely. So we look forward to sharing more stories of good with you. Once a month, we have a webinar on our Good Table Conversations. Every Friday, we have a podcast called Conversations Around Good. We love sharing stories. So thank you for joining us, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, Tracy.